I'm sorry, but loving someone without ambition starts feeling exhausting eventually," my fiancée said during dinner while comparing me to her friend's wealthy husband across the table. I quietly nodded and ended the conversation forever. Nearly a year later, she froze after seeing me featured in a local magazine while delivering food orders to my apartment building. "I'm sorry, but loving someone without ambition starts feeling exhausting eventually." She said it the way people say things they've been rehearsing. Not loudly, not with tears, just flatly, the way you'd read a line off a receipt. I set my fork down. I didn't slam it. I didn't make a sound. I just placed it quietly on the edge of the plate and looked at her. Lauren was still cutting her chicken. She wasn't even watching me when she said it. Like it wasn't the kind of thing that required eye contact. I took a slow breath and looked around the restaurant. It was the kind of place we'd picked because it was halfway between nice and affordable. Warm lighting, small candles on the tables. The kind of spot we used to love because it felt like ours. Now it just felt like a backdrop for something ending. "Exhausting," I repeated. She nodded, still not looking up. That word sat in the air between us like smoke after a fire has already done its damage. She didn't mean it the way it sounded, or at least that's what she'd probably tell herself later. She meant it the way status-conscious people always mean things, as a warning dressed up as an observation. As honesty that's really just comparison wearing a different coat. She had spent the last 40 minutes talking about Marcus and Danielle. Marcus was the husband of her friend from college. He'd just been promoted to senior director at some financial firm in Midtown. They'd bought a condo in Tribeca. Danielle had posted about the kitchen renovation 3 times that week. Lauren had shown me the photos while we waited for our food. I'd smiled and said it looked beautiful, because it did. I didn't know that was going to become a measuring stick. I didn't know that by the time our entrees arrived, I would somehow be on trial for not being Marcus. She genuinely believed she was being honest with me that night. That, somehow, made it hurt more than anything else she could have said. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't tell her everything I'd been quietly building or everything I'd sacrificed to keep us stable while she figured out what she wanted from life. I just nodded once. She finally looked up, seemed almost relieved, like she thought nodding meant I agreed with her. I didn't. What I was doing was much quieter than agreement. I was ending things. Right there. In my own head. Over a plate of pasta I suddenly had no appetite for. At the time, I thought that dinner was simply the end of a relationship. I had no idea it would become the beginning of everything else. We had been engaged for 7 months when that dinner happened. The ring had been my grandmother's. A simple white gold band with a small round stone. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd post on Instagram and rack up 400 likes. But it had history, and I thought Lauren understood that when she'd cried the night I gave it to her. Maybe she did understand it then. Or maybe things change when your college friend starts posting kitchen renovation photos. We'd been together for 3 years before the engagement. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Astoria. She was funny and warm, and had this way of laughing at her own jokes before she finished telling them that I found completely disarming. I fell for her quickly. I don't regret that part. We had a date set. October. A venue deposit that had taken me 4 months to save up for. A guest list we'd argued about twice and finally settled on. Her mother had already started looking at dresses. I had been looking forward to October. After that dinner, I quietly stopped. The thing about Lauren was that she didn't flip a switch overnight. It was gradual, like most slow-moving damage is. Looking back, there were clues everywhere. I just wasn't ready to see them. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 31 when all of this happened. Lauren was 29. We'd been living together in a 2-bedroom apartment in Jackson Heights for about 14 months. Her name was on the lease too, which mattered later. At the time of that dinner, I was working as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized distribution company in Long Island City. It paid decently. Not Marcus and Tribeca decently, but enough for us to live comfortably, save a little, take a trip once a year if we planned for it. I also had a side project I hadn't told many people about. Not because I was hiding it, but because I learned early that talking about unfinished things before they're finished has a way of jinxing them. Or worse, of inviting opinions from people who haven't done the work themselves. Lauren knew something was happening. She'd seen me on my laptop late at night. She'd noticed the notebooks. She'd asked once, and I'd said I was working on something I'd tell her about when it was ready. She hadn't asked again. I told myself that was because she trusted me. I was wrong about that too. The truth was, by that point, she'd already stopped being curious about what I was building. She was too busy measuring what I hadn't finished yet. The first time I noticed something had shifted was about 8 months before the dinner. We were at a rooftop party in Williamsburg. One of Lauren's co-workers was hosting. Nice place, nice people, the kind of event where everybody's doing well and everybody knows it and nobody says it out loud, but you can feel it in every conversation. Lauren had been quiet on the subway over. Not upset quiet, just somewhere else. When we got there, she immediately found Danielle. I got myself a drink, talked to a few people, did the usual party circling. Around the 45-minute mark, I came back to find Lauren and Danielle deep in conversation near the railing, looking out over the skyline. Danielle was showing her something on her phone. Later, in the Uber home, Lauren said, "Marcus just got his bonus. They're talking about a place in Tribeca." I said, "Good for them." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "It's crazy what the right career can do for your life." I looked at her. "Yeah," I said, "it is." She didn't say anything else. Neither did I. But something small had changed in the air between us, and I felt it. The way you feel a drop in temperature before you see any clouds. I filed it away and didn't bring it up. That was the first sign. I missed it. Over the next several months, the comparisons became more frequent and less subtle. It started with small comments. The kind that have enough plausible deniability to survive an argument. "Have you ever thought about moving into finance? Eric from my office just got promoted again. He's only 28. Some people our age are already thinking about investment properties." Each one felt like a test I hadn't studied for. I answered calmly every time. I wasn't defensive. I'd explain where I was, what I was working toward, why the timing made sense to me. She'd nod, seem satisfied. And then 2 weeks later, another comment would surface. What I didn't know then, and what I understand clearly now, was that those conversations weren't really about me. They were about what I represented to her. And what I represented was starting to look like a problem. About 5 months before the dinner, Lauren started spending more time with a group of friends I'd always kept a polite distance from. Not because they were bad people, but because every time I was around them, the entire evening eventually turned into a comparison exercise. Who got promoted? Whose boyfriend had equity? Whose apartment had a doorman? It was the kind of social environment where the question, "What do you do?" was really asking, "Where do you rank?" Lauren had always been able to hold her own in those rooms. She had a good job in marketing, made decent money, dressed well. But she was starting to feel like something was missing from her side of the ledger. And I was what was missing. One night, about 3 months before the dinner, I woke up around 2 in the morning and noticed she wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her phone, the screen brightness all the way up. I asked if she was okay. She startled slightly, then said, "Yeah, can't sleep." I got a glass of water and went back to bed. I didn't think much of it at the time. But looking back now, I wonder what she was reading, what she was comparing, what version of our future she was reconsidering at 2 in the morning. I think I know. The dinner happened on a Tuesday. We'd gone out to eat because neither of us felt like cooking. The place was a neighborhood spot we'd been to maybe a dozen times. Familiar enough to feel comfortable. Comfortable enough, apparently, for her to say the thing she'd been assembling for months. It started with Danielle again. The kitchen renovation was complete. Photos had gone up that afternoon. Marble countertops, a farmhouse sink, an island with pendant lighting. Lauren had been scrolling through them while we waited for our drinks. "It's really beautiful," she said. "It is," I agreed. Then, Marcus really came through for her. I looked up from the menu. "She works too, Lauren." "I know that." A pause. "But he set the foundation." "That's what I mean." I went back to the menu. A few minutes of silence. The server came, we ordered. When he left, she put her phone face down on the table and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. It was careful, measured, like someone about to make an argument they'd been rehearsing. "Can I say something without you getting defensive?" "I never get defensive," I said. And it was true. "I've been thinking a lot lately." She paused. "About us. About where we're going." I waited. I look at Marcus and Danielle, and I see something I want. Like a real trajectory. Movement. I want to feel like we're building towards something visible. "We are building something," I said. "I don't see it, though." Her voice was level. And I think that's the problem. I need to be able to see it. I need to feel it. And then she said it. "I'm sorry, but loving someone without ambition starts feeling exhausting eventually." The table went quiet. Not the restaurant. Just our table. I heard other conversations around us. Someone laughing 2 tables over. A server calling out an order near the kitchen. Life just going on, completely indifferent to the fact that something in me had gone still. She genuinely believed she was being honest. That somehow made it hurt more. Because I could see, very clearly, that she wasn't talking about ambition. She was talking about appearances. She wanted something that looked like success, not something that was becoming it. She wanted the Tribeca condo photos, the bonus, the marble countertops. She wanted the story that was easy to tell at rooftop parties. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I picked my fork back up. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay. Yeah. She seemed uncertain, like she'd expected more. An argument, maybe. Or a defense. Or tears. I gave her none of those things. I finished my meal. I talked about small, unimportant things. The weather. A show she'd been watching. I was polite. I was calm. I was, I think, unreadable. Because inside, I had already left. Not the restaurant. Not the relationship yet, technically. But I had left in every way that mattered. That was the last time she saw me as the man she thought I was. The next 3 weeks were quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet we used to have in the apartment. The careful kind. The kind where both people are waiting for something, but neither wants to be the one who says it first. Lauren seemed to take my silence at the dinner as acceptance. Like I'd heard her critique and would now correct myself. She brought up a financial planning seminar twice. Left a magazine open to an article about career reinvention. Mentioned, casually, that Marcus was looking for people in his department. I listened. I nodded. I said almost nothing. My friend Nathan noticed something was off when we grabbed coffee one Saturday. He looked at me across the table and said, "You good?" "Working through some things," I said. He didn't push. That's why I've always respected Nathan. He knows when to wait. What happened 3 months later surprised even me. But before we get there, there's something the story needs. Because the night Lauren called me unambitious across a dinner table, she didn't know what she was actually sitting across from. And I think that matters. I need to go back before I go forward. Because there's a version of me that Lauren saw, and then there's the version that actually existed. And those two things were not the same. 3 years earlier, when Lauren and I first got serious, I was working a lower-paying operations job and going to school part-time for a certification in supply chain management. I didn't talk about it much. I just did it. I paid for it myself. Night classes twice a week for 11 months. I was tired constantly. I remember falling asleep on the subway more times than I can count. When I got the certification and used it to move into the coordinator role, a 22% salary increase, Lauren had been happy for me. We'd gone out to dinner to celebrate. Nice place in Manhattan. What she didn't know was that I'd been spending the last 18 months quietly building something on the side. A logistics consulting framework. Essentially, a structured system for small and mid-sized businesses that couldn't afford enterprise-level supply chain solutions. I'd started it because I kept seeing the same problems at work, and I kept thinking, someone should build a solution for businesses at this level. The kind that don't make the business press, but employ 40 or 80 people and keep neighborhoods running. I'd been building it slowly, methodically. I had 2 small clients already paying for pilot versions of the service by the time that dinner happened. Neither of them was big. One was a restaurant supply company in the Bronx. The other was a clothing distributor in Queens. But they were real, and they were paying, and the model was working. I hadn't told Lauren because I was waiting until it was real enough to show, not just describe. She never got to that reveal. She tapped out before the intermission. There's one more thing. The year we moved in together, Lauren had gone through a rough stretch professionally. Her contract at a previous agency hadn't been renewed. She was freelancing and struggling to find steady clients. For about 4 months, I covered the majority of the rent. No conversation about it. No ledger. I just handled it. She eventually landed the marketing job she still has. We never talked about those 4 months again. I didn't bring it up then, and I didn't bring it up at that dinner. But I thought about it, sitting across from her while she called me unambitious. I thought about it, and then I let it go. I moved out 8 days after the dinner. Not dramatically. I packed what was mine, arranged to have a few boxes shipped, and found a studio sublet in Ridgewood through a guy at work named Jordan who'd had it listed for a month. It was smaller than what I was used to. 1 window facing a brick wall. A kitchen you could stand in the center of and touch both counters. It was exactly what I needed. Lauren had asked me, the night I started packing, if this was really what I wanted. I said, I think we both know where things are. She didn't argue. Not really. She said some things about communication, about timing, about pressure. I listened. I didn't disagree. I didn't pile on. I just finished packing. The ring went back to her. She'd left it on the kitchen counter. I took it with me because it had been my grandmother's. She didn't object. That was the end of us. The beginning of everything else was already in motion before I even signed the sublease. The first month in the studio, I worked. I really worked. With no social obligations pulling at my evenings, no tension quietly pressurizing the apartment, no one looking over my shoulder and calculating what I was worth. I had a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I reached back out to my 2 pilot clients and started formalizing the engagements. I called Brandon, a contact I'd met at an industry event 2 years earlier who'd since moved into a small business development role with a borough economic council. We'd kept in loose touch. I told him what I was building. He said, "Send me the overview." I did. He called me 3 days later and said, "I want to connect you with some people." What happened 3 months later surprised even me. Brandon introduced me to a small cohort of business owners through a development workshop his council was running. 5 businesses, all of them mid-sized, all of them dealing with inefficiencies I recognized immediately. I signed 2 of them within 30 days. Not huge contracts, but real ones. Ones that paid. My day job gave me my mornings and evenings, and I used every hour of them. I stopped watching things I didn't care about. I started sleeping better, eating better, thinking more clearly. I ran 3 mornings a week around the park. I saw Nathan for coffee most Saturdays. He watched all of this happening and one day said, "You look like someone who knows something other people don't." I laughed. "Not yet," I said. "Ask me in 6 months." He did. By that point, I had 5 active clients, a registered LLC, and a part-time contractor helping me with documentation. It had been 9 months since the dinner. And then a woman named Cecily Torres reached out to me. Cecily was a features writer for a borough-focused business publication. Not a major magazine. A local one. The kind that sits in waiting rooms and coffee shop racks and gets read by the people who actually run things in the neighborhoods. She'd heard about me through Brandon's counsel. She wanted to do a profile. On the record, a small business owner building a logistics consultancy from a studio apartment in Ridgewood, creating real infrastructure for businesses that don't make headlines. I said yes. The issue came out on a Thursday. I didn't know she would see it. I don't know exactly what the odds were, considering the size of the publication, the neighborhood readership, the delivery route she was working. But life has a way of arranging things you couldn't have scripted. It was a Saturday afternoon in late September. I was in my building's lobby, waiting for a package, when the door buzzed. I hit the intercom. Yeah. Delivery. I pressed the door release without thinking. A minute later, I heard the elevator open. I had my back to the door, checking my phone. When I turned around, I saw her. Lauren, wearing a delivery app t-shirt, a thermal bag in one hand, a phone with a navigation app open in the other. She was looking at apartment numbers on the wall. Then she saw me. The thermal bag lowered slightly, the way something drops when the hand holding it goes uncertain. I watched her face do something complicated. Recognition, then confusion, then something that took a second to name. Shock. Not just the shock of seeing an ex-fiancé, the shock of the magazine. Because tucked under her other arm, along with a second order, was a copy of the issue. My photo was on the page facing outward. I could see the headline from where I stood. Building from the ground up. How one Queens entrepreneur is changing supply chain for the businesses your neighborhood depends on. We stood about 10 feet apart. I said, "Hey, Lauren." She said, "This is your building?" "For about a year now," I said. She looked down at the magazine. Back up at me. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't." She handed me the delivery, my order, it turned out, which I'd completely forgotten I'd placed that morning. I took it. I didn't move to leave. She didn't either. "You look good," she said. "Thanks." A pause that lasted longer than it needed to. "The article," she started. "It came out Thursday," I said. She nodded. Her jaw was doing something tight. The way people look when they're holding something in and running out of room. "I had no idea you were this far along with everything." "I know. Why didn't you ever?" "I tried to tell you I was building something," I said. Not harshly, just clearly. "You told me that loving someone without ambition was exhausting." She flinched. It wasn't a dramatic flinch, just a small tightening around the eyes. "That wasn't fair," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." Another pause. "I'm sorry," she said. I believed her. But sorry, at a certain distance, doesn't have any work left to do. "I appreciate that," I said. And I meant it. She looked at the magazine one more time. Then at me. "I made a real mistake," she said. "It wasn't a question. I think we both figured out what we needed to figure out," I said. "That doesn't have to be a mistake. It's just how it went." She nodded slowly. Her eyes were getting glassy. She wasn't going to cry in a building lobby, I could tell. She had too much pride for that. "Are you happy?" she asked. I thought about the question honestly. The way I always try to. Yeah, I said. I actually am. She nodded again, adjusted the thermal bag in her hand, looked at the door. I'm glad, she said. And I think she meant that too, even if it cost her something to say it. She left. I stood in the lobby for another minute, holding my delivery bag, the building quiet around me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated in the dramatic, fist-pumping way you might imagine. What I felt was something quieter than that. Like a door had closed correctly. Like a season had finished becoming what it was always going to be. It's been about 3 months since that afternoon in the lobby. Lauren still does delivery work, from what Nathan mentioned once. I didn't ask for details, and he didn't offer them. I hope she's okay. I genuinely do. Whatever she's working through, I don't carry any anger about it. That weight is too heavy to keep moving with. I know that Marcus and Danielle's Tribeca condo sold at a loss 8 months ago. I know that only because Jordan mentioned it offhand, and I didn't follow up. It wasn't satisfying to hear. It was just information. I have 4 full-time clients now, and 2 more in pipeline conversations. I hired a second contractor last month, a sharp logistics analyst named Eric who reached out after seeing the article. The day job is still there, but I've given notice. My last day is in 6 weeks. Brandon and I have been talking about a more formal partnership structure. Nothing locked in yet, but the conversations are real and the numbers support it. The studio in Ridgewood is still small. The window still faces the brick wall. But there's a notebook on my desk with pages almost full of things that have already happened, not just things I'm hoping for. That's new. That's different. I don't know exactly where things are going from here. I know the trajectory, and I know what I'm willing to do to follow it. That's enough. Nathan asked me recently if I ever think about how things would have gone if that dinner had never happened. If Lauren had never said the things she said. If we'd gotten married in October and kept going the way we were going. I thought about it honestly. I think I would have kept building. I think the business would have grown anyway, maybe slightly slower, maybe along the same timeline. I don't know that Lauren's presence in my life was what was holding me back, but I also know that something about that dinner, that quiet, flat delivery of the word exhausting, removed something for me that had been heavy without my realizing it. The need to explain myself. The habit of waiting for someone else's version of me to be acceptable before I moved forward. I stopped needing that. And without it, I moved faster than I ever had. So maybe, in its strange way, it was the thing that had to happen. I don't say that for Lauren's benefit. I say it because it's the truest thing I know. A year earlier, she saw a man with no ambition. Standing there that day in the lobby, she finally saw the future she had walked away from. By then, it wasn't hers anymore.